I mean, you're asking some really, really deep questions. Let me just tell you that our American health system has for decades been in need of an overhaul. As a medical doctor, most of us are trained to treat disease, not prevent it, trained to write prescriptions. Diet and lifestyle was all we had until the sort of the pharmaceutical revolution. I have been involved with developing better cancer treatments, better treatments for diabetes. So I'm a believer in innovation and advancement. This is where we're beginning to see true cures coming from. I've seen people with stage 4 cancer go to stage 0. Brain cancer, endometrial cancer, my own mother, stage 4 to stage 0. And the way that this is happening is by lighting up your immune system, allowing your own defenses to go to work. Here's a shocking truth. We are all forming cancers inside our body all the time. What's the best diet to have if you are battling cancer? Hello, good to see you.
Thanks so much for coming on. I'm kind of like, I don't know if I'm Brian Johnson level lab rat with myself, but but I do love to lab rat myself. I've got a kit just sitting off to my left for me
Okay.
to do in a little bit of time after I've done some supplements. So anyway, for me, I feel like it's like just a pure fascination with the body and wanting to optimize and probably a little bit of being an athlete. But why are you so passionate about health?
Well, I'm a physician, so my business is health. But as a medical doctor, most of us are trained to treat disease, not prevent it, and most of us are trained to write prescriptions and do the more standard medical interventions. Somewhere along the line, I would say in the last 50 years, 60 years, we've actually lost touch with the fact that before pharmaceuticals, all we had was food in our environment. Diet and lifestyle was what all we had until the sort of the pharmaceutical revolution. Now, that said, I have been involved in my day job at the Angiogenesis Foundation, which is a nonprofit I've been leading for 30 years. I have been involved with developing better cancer treatments, better treatments for diabetes, and even ways to prevent vision loss. So I'm a believer in innovation and advancement. However, on a personal level, I also feel that we've lost a bit of our humanity, which has to do with our food, because food is what makes us human. It brings us together. I've always been very passionate about the connection between food, culture, and our health. If you go almost anywhere else in the world outside of America, you'll find, proud group of people talking about what their ancestors ate and the traditions that they have for their holidays. And I think that that's a wonderful thing. I grew up in the town of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Rust Belt city, plenty of ethnicities. And I literally grew up like celebrating the food cultures of different countries. So when I went to college, I always brought that with me. And after I graduated college, but before I went to medical school, now, I was a biochemist in college. I studied biochemistry. Before I went to medical school, I did a gap year. And when I did the gap year, I embedded myself in the Mediterranean. I went to Italy and I lived in Greece. I walked the walk, so to speak, long before anybody was talking the talk on Mediterranean diet, because I was so curious about how people in a different place than I grew up in Pennsylvania, how they actually related to their food. And so I went with, the nonas and the yayas to the market, and I watched them cook and I helped them cook. I even had this remarkable experience where I went to a monastery, mountain climbing, and went to a monastery in northeastern Greece called Mount Athos. I was there. I happened to be there over around the Easter holiday feast, and Easter feast is a huge deal in Greece. And the monk who was the cook there got sick, got the flu. And so I got tapped to really help cook Easter feast. And I remember like we had this gigantic vat with beans and I was stirring it with like a canoe paddle kind of thing. But anyway, and I also like to cook. So I went to medical school. I realized that as we were being taught everything there is to know about disease and everything there is to know about the medicines that we write prescriptions for to treat disease, the missing part of the conversation was about what we should eat. And yet every patient always asks their doctor, hey, doc, what should I be doing for myself? If there's something you recommend me eating. So that really kind of inspired me to really begin looking at food as medicine. And because I'm also a scientist, I study the circulation. There's 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels in your body, and they all respond to everything. I mean, like when you were driving and you were like going at high speeds, those blood vessels are completely reacting, and you probably you know, from sitting in the seat, right?
I hope so. I needed a lot of reaction at 230 miles an hour in the middle of the corner with, 3 or 4 G's pulling against me.
It's amazing how resilient your circulation actually is, because it was able to respond to those forces and
Yeah.
then whip back to actually get you to where you need to be: brain, heart, kidney, skin, eyes, you name it, right? So that's what captured my interest in terms of my research interest, is this common denominator of health and common denominator of disease. Like, how do we actually look at common denominators? So, my worlds all came together by looking at food, medicine, common denominators of health and disease, and and it's really what brought me to my passion in food as medicine.
Yeah, that's fun. I mean, what a fun pathway to learn as well. I recently listened to an interview that Casey Means had done. She mentioned that one of the things that being in medical school that she was never taught in her 9 years was that you can actually write a prescription for food and fitness. Like you can get a gym membership on prescription and some food options as well, which, as you said, these are some of the primary pathways to being healthy. So I'm curious, when you were over in Italy and Greece and learning from the cultures, which I think maybe there's a couple of them over there that are maybe even some of the blue zones, what is it that you learned from their culture that creates the longevity that they have in some of those areas?
Yes, I mean, such a great question. And I'm glad you kind of preface this by saying that, you've got a kit and you're interested in, the whole
Oh, yeah.
biohacking aspect of it. Look, let me tell you what I learned. I learned that people who live long lives in the best possible world also live very full and vibrant lives. And this is something that I saw very clearly in my travels when I was doing research in Italy and Greece. And what I learned from them was that the dietary patterns that they followed, and most of the lifestyle things, obviously modern life like whips us in different directions, many of which are not that healthy, but but diet, especially the traditional diet, based on many of the same principles that we know from research is good for our health and good for longevity. So, for example, there's a lot being spoken about now about plant-based eating. I mean, it sounds new, but actually it's really old, because, in fact, most parts of the world, meat was very expensive and not very common. Even in America, before 1950s, it was like kind of expensive to get a piece of steak. But, in Italy and Greece, it was mostly plants, mostly seasonal, mostly local, right? So these are all the things that we're championing now with modern research, but it's been known for many, many years. Eat locally, eat seasonally, eat fresh, cook with healthy ingredients, care about what you actually put in there. It's not just about cost and speed, which is kind of like where our society somehow we kind of went off the track, so to speak, and lost our way. But you know what? Actually, we're getting back on it, and that's the good news. Is I think there's more people realizing that there are some universal truths about, eating healthy that aren't brand new. What is new, Danica, is that we have incredibly powerful science to help us understand the why. And the why is, the gives us the reason to believe, and also allows us to innovate. And I think that's what I'm somebody who's always sort of lived with one foot in the future in terms of the research I do, and I'm very practical. So I want to see future things happen as quickly as possible and figure out how do we benefit from that now. And what's amazing about what we already have in front of us: our food system, our food supply, our ingredients that we get at the local market, whether it's the farmer's market or even in a frozen section of a grocery store. There's some really good stuff in there, and so I try to make people understand that if you have a passion for health and you want to use food to fuel it up, that passion, you don't need to go to the far extremes. You don't need to be a billionaire. You don't need to get monthly supplement subscriptions. you can start with the grocery store, look in your pantry, look in your fridge. You can start there because that is actually making it health accessible to everyone.
I've gone through many iterations of my diet to the point where the people closest to me, when I see them, if I'm working or doing something, I'll be like, what are you eating now? Like, because I become very specific and I follow it very closely. And, I feel that the least healthy I ever was when I removed animal products from my diet. When I went basically some level of pescatarian, but sort of like paleo, dabbled a little vegan. It was the least energy I ever felt. It was the worst body composition I ever had. And that I've kind of grown now into really understanding and believing in the fact that we really do need dietary protein, that it is foundational. I questioned that. I followed all the propaganda. I followed all the curiosities. And I've really come to realize it's tremendously foundational in my diet. And then, of course, you have on the very far extreme, who's a great friend of mine, Michaela Peterson, and the whole Peterson family, that follow what would be the Lion's diet, she called it, which is they literally eat steak only. That's all they eat. And they've eliminated so many issues health wise, everything from anxiety to sleep, and of course, weight loss as well. With that. So what do you have to say about all that? Because you just mentioned how important plants were. And I just can't help but wonder, we're all uniquely individually different. And
Yeah.
like for instance, I can eat broccoli, no problem, but cauliflower tends to bother me a little bit. And that's
Yeah.
just like one of those, they're like this from the same family of vegetables. So why is that? But I do think that there's something to be said about the fact that literally you can live off of steak. You could not live off of broccoli.
Well, listen, I'm so glad you brought up the fact that, you've tried different things, you felt different ways on different diets. And, by the way, I'm not a vegan by any means, but I think that, I'm sort of like a flexitarian. And I think that the key thing is to recognize that, the optimal diet for each of us is very personalized and individualized. We all are different. And in fact, we're not only different from one another, we are different from ourselves at different points in our life. How we are as children, teenagers, young adults, middle age, and as we get older, in sort of the last chapters of our life, they're all going to change. And so I think that one of the things that's very important to do, and it sounds like you're already, well versed in this, is to be in touch with your own body, feel how you feel when you eat something. Everyone, we rapid accelerators and whatever, slow accelerators, how we metabolize our food. By the way, our gut health, our gut microbiome, the healthy bacteria in our gut also plays a role in how well we digest and process and reflect back to our overall health, including our mental health, how we're feeling. And everyone's gut bacteria is a little bit different. And by the way, if you're looking for a kit to get, you should definitely get a microbiome kit because
Oh,
that's actually going to tell you something really powerful about your body that you would not otherwise know, no matter what you do.
is that a stool
Um,
test? Is that a stool test? Is that a
it's
blood
a
urine?
Yeah, it's a stool test. Basically, it's like a swab, and you swab the stool, which gives you a dipstick of your gut, and then you send it off,
Oh,
they give you a huge amount of data
yeah, those are
about what kind
fantastic.
of bacteria you have. By the way, you're talking about longevity, so I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
And this is like an important point to think about diet. Do you know anybody who's 100 years old? Have you met anybody personally who has reached 100?
I don't think so.
I was giving a lecture at a keynote at a longevity program a few months ago, and I asked that same question. And I started by saying, you know what? I felt really lucky that my great uncle lived to 104.
Wow.
I was at his 100th birthday party. He was completely mentally intact. He planned his own birthday party. He walked to his own birthday party. And and I, of course, I mined him, interviewed him about all the things that he thought was helpful for him. So I realized that it's possible to live 100. So I asked people, there's about 300 people in the room, like, how many people know someone who's 100? So a few people raised their hands. And see, it's not just me. We all know many of us know people who are much older. So Do you have any idea how many people are 100 or older on Earth today, as of right now?
As a
Take a guess.
percentage, a percentage?
No, 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 just a number. Just
Oh,
give me a
just
number.
people. Yeah, the percentage is too small.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna say maybe 1,000.
700,000 people as of right
Wow.
now are 100 or older. Cool, right? Like amazing.
Fantastic.
Right.
I want to live till
So
120, so I that's good. It's good
that's
information.
a good mile marker, so to speak, right? So the point is this. The point is that we now are beginning to have enough people where we can actually do studies to take a look at what it is that allow people to live to that age. And by the way, the interesting thing about people who are 100 today, the 700,000, they didn't have glucose sensors or apps or tracking or wearables. They just lived their lives the way they live their lives. And I think that that's a kind of an important thing for us to realize, is that the science can start to peel back the onion to give us some answers. All the tools that we have today only give us more information. The reason I was telling you about the gut bacteria, which brought this up, is because it turns out a study in Italy looked at people who are super agers. And I'm talking about people who are like 105 and 110. So not just your centenarians, but the super centenarians. And they looked at all the different things that set them apart. And something that was stunning to me as a researcher and as a doctor was that they, when they looked in their microbiome, believe it or not, they actually got microbiome from these people. They found that there were 4 bacteria that were standouts, really high, in people that were super agers, that weren't as high in people who didn't make it that long.
Okay.
Interesting, right? And they were comparing the people who were like in their 20s and 40s and 60s and 70s and 90s, didn't have this standout. So these 4 bacteria, okay, it was Akkermansia, Oscillobacter, Christianobacter, and Odorobacter, these 4. Don't worry about the names of them. Just know that we're beginning to identify them.
Right.
They all do things that are important for longevity. They help our metabolism, lower inflammation. They help improve our circulation, help us balance our metabolism. All the things we know are already important.
Wow.
And guess what? There are foods that we can eat to help grow these bacteria.
I love this. What are some of the foods that I hope that you're going to include? Red wine and chocolate, and I think you might.
Well, as it turns out, chocolate is incredible because it does have these polyphenols, the
Right.
proanthocyanidins that actually feed the gut microbiome. It's really good for gut health.
Polyphenols and
And what
resveratrol. We're set.
and what making a happy gut microbiome, gut bacteria, does is it lowers our inflammation, because our gut bacteria, when they're properly fed and happy, I say that, like, we give our gut microbiome, our gut bacteria, room and board, right? They can live in our gut and we feed them. And when we do that properly, they pay us back. They pay the rent by releasing these things called short chain fatty acids. And the short chain fatty acids are just released in our bloodstream. They lower inflammation, which is really, really important. And these bacteria also help us streamline our metabolism. You've heard a lot, in the news recently, I'm sure, about glucose spikes and glucose crashes. That, good, healthy gut bacteria tries to smooth out things so that you don't want to be a flat line. You want to have like sort of, peaks and troughs.
Oh, does that affect insulin? There's a correlation between gut bacteria and insulin?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And not
What?
just insulin, but insulin sensitivity,
Yeah.
which is even more important. How
Wow.
well your body is able to draw and absorb the glucose
Sure.
that you're
Because
eating.
it's not that the spikes are so bad, it's that they don't come down.
Yes, and by the way, I'm going to give you now. I'm also a cancer researcher, so let's do a little bit deep dive into this whole glucose elevation issue. I generally don't use the word glucose spike, because while it does happen, like, it doesn't happen as most people think about. And spikes and crashes are scary to hear about, right? So what I say is sort of, it's more like peaks and troughs, and how high your peak is and how low the trough goes. Like, if you're a surfer, like, unless you want to surf that gigantic wave in Portugal,
Yeah.
which most people don't, you don't want to go that high. And so
Yeah.
but here's what's happened. Glucose itself at very high levels in the bloodstream damage our circulation. Our blood vessels, that 60,000 miles we talked about, these are the highways and byways that bring oxygen and nutrients and blood to every single organ in our body. We want those highways to be nice and smooth. You don't want potholes, you don't want cracks. You want those roads to be nice and smooth, well paved. High blood glucose for a long period of time wears down the lining of your blood vessels. So you wind up having damaged blood vessels. That affects your brain, your heart, all of your organs in a bad way. And that's why, by the way, one of the complications of diabetes, where people actually wind up having damaged circulation, they got heart disease, they go blind, they have problems healing their wounds, is because of this vascular or blood vessel damage. So, but way before you get to diabetes, you wind up, just starting to have the tide is rising higher than it should. It's kind of like, the global warming in the sea around Mauritius or whatever, the Maldives is rising. Okay, so you got to be careful. Like when your blood glucose actually gets really, really high, your insulin will step up its game. So you'll make your pancreas will make more insulin to try to counter it, because the body knows you don't want those high levels all the time. And here's the interesting thing. I told you the glucose damages, high glucose, hyperglycemia damages the blood vessels. By the way, the hyperglycemia does one other thing I want to tell you about. So our bodies can regenerate itself. It's amazing. We have stem cells left over from birth that we actually have hidden away, packed away, like socks in a drawer in our body. Okay.
We do?
And 70 million. When you were born, Danica, you had 70 million extra stem cells. The rest of them were used to build your body. Okay. When you were born, the doctor cut the cord. The 70 million extra stem cells were just packed away, folded up like socks in a drawer, put away. And your body, over the course of your life, stored away in your bone marrow, in your body fat, in your skin. Okay. And whenever your body needs to repair itself, okay, your stem cells are called out of their drawers like bees coming out of a hive, and they know exactly where to go to fix what's broken.
Wow,
Okay?
this opens up a whole new drawer of stem cells, exogenous versus your own, and even just
this is endogenous.
cultivating them and injecting more of them. So I'm so fascinated the fact that your body literally already just does this anyway.
Yep, and foods can raise the level of stem cells. But back to the high blood sugar for a second. Hyperglycemia, high blood sugar, stuns your stem cells. Okay, we got lots of blood sugar around. It just makes you make your stem cells punch drunk. All right, so they're not able to do what they're supposed to do. But that's the blood sugar. Now, what about the insulin that your body tries to up its game to try to bring down that blood glucose? Well, you got a lot of glucose. Your insulin's going to keep pumping up, and if your gut isn't healthy and your body's not sensitive to the insulin, so it can't draw that sugar down. Okay, what happens is that your body just keeps on making more insulin, thinking that that's the problem. We just need more insulin. Now, here's the part that a lot of people don't know, but that is a researcher's insight. Insulin itself is good, very useful. It's a hormone, metabolic hormone, but it's the stuff that's needed, the machinery that's needed to create insulin within your body. It's called insulin-like growth factor. Okay, IGF. Okay, that is only supposed to be around for a little bit at a time. And when you actually have a lot of insulin-like growth factor, the problem is IGF, this insulin-like growth factor, the substrate that the factory needs to make more insulin in your body. There's huge amounts of IGF. It sets you up for lots of chronic diseases, including cancer, because IGF, this hormone, when it's up at super high levels all the time, with high insulin, for example, that actually is a growth factor for tumors and for cancer cells. So it all kind of makes sense, right? Like, I mean, when your body's out of balance, it can't do its thing. Right. It tries to compensate, but it can't compensate the right way to bring you back to earth. Right. So what we're really talking about in living a balanced, healthy life for a long life to achieve longevity, you need to actually go for this, what we call homeostasis, which is a constant state of balance. It's okay to be, like I talked about, like these, hills and, up hills and down hills, that's okay. That's okay. As long as you're circulating the base, if you're riding around the baseline, you're going to be fine.
Well, you mentioned obviously all that conversation, talk about glucose and insulin and cancer, and how there's so much talk around the fact that cancer feeds on sugar. And so I can't help but wonder, from your perspective, also researching cancer, what the correlation between glucose and cancer is, and if cancer really does feed on sugar. And then, of course, then what would be the right diet for someone in that situation?
Yeah. Look, it's such an important question because every cancer patient always asks
Oh,
their
I
oncologist, like, what should I do? What should I
I
eat?
have a
And,
friend who has cancer, who had cancer, and there are many different proposals of different things to eat. One is like whatever you can eat, another one's juice, another one's this. It's like, these people, their lives are on the line and they don't know what they're supposed to be doing.
yeah, well, so this is actually one of the things that I actually study. I've spent a lot of time doing this. I gave a TED talk on it. So let me just tell you that there is an answer
Mm.
for that cancer patients should be seeking, which is what's the best diet to have if you are battling cancer. And the right answer is really anything that helps tip the balance in your body to favor your own health defenses against the cancer. You can make the treatment work better by tipping the odds in your own favor. What does that actually mean? That means
Yeah.
lowering eating foods that lower inflammation, because
Okay.
inflammation is like throwing gasoline onto the embers of a fire. You're going to get a big flare, and
Okay.
cancer loves inflammation. It really when you like literally you eat inflammatory foods, which a lot of ultra processed foods are, and a lot of additives and artificial stuff. That'll make the tumor flare up, and so you don't want that. So one of the things is to cut down or cut out a lot of those ultra processed foods.
Mm.
But you also want to lower inflammation. And your gut bacteria, which we started talking about already, is your most powerful anti-inflammatory tool there is. By feeding your gut microbiome with healthy polyphenols, dietary fiber, you'll turn on your gut bacteria. They will lower inflammation in your body, starting to tip the odds against the cancer. They're depriving them of the inflammation. Now, there are other things you can do. There are polyphenols that you can eat, and I'm going to come to the sugar thing in a second.
Yeah.
But there are polyphenols you can eat in foods like resveratrol, you mentioned, in grapes and in walnuts, for example. But you can
Turns out
also
you
have
have to drink like way too much red wine to get enough of
yeah,
it, but I
right,
still,
right, right, right. Right. Which is why I mentioned like other foods that can actually have
yeah.
resveratrol. But you can actually have and again, I'm going to say a bunch of chemicals. Don't worry about the chemical names. Just know that there's researchers studying this. Ellagic acid in strawberries, anthocyanins in blueberries, isothiocyanates in brassica, like broccoli, and in bok choy, for example. Lots of healthy fats in nuts and in seafood. All those kinds of polyphenols and dietary factors, we call them bioactives. They have been studied to be anti-cancer, and my own research shows many of those polyphenols are anti-angiogenic, meaning they cut off the blood supply, feeding tumors. So that's another tipping your body's balance in favor of you winning against the cancer. Now, one of the most important things you can do is actually to ramp up your immune system, because we now know that your immune system is one of the most powerful defenses against cancer that we actually have. In fact, the biggest breakthrough in cancer research in the last 100 years is something called immunotherapy. It's not chemo, okay? Doesn't slash and burn in front of it. What it does, immunotherapy, is it lights up, fires up your own immune system to find and tackle cancer by yourself. It's the most natural type of cancer therapy you can think of. And by the way, this is where we're beginning to see true cures coming from,
Wow.
complete responses. In fact, I can tell you, in my experience, I've seen things that I never thought I would see during my career as a physician. I've seen people with stage 4 cancer go to stage 0 cancer. All right. Brain cancer, stage 4 to stage 0. Endometrial cancer, my own mother, stage 4 to stage 0. It's remarkable that this actually occurs. And the way that this is happening is by lighting up your immune system and allowing your own defenses to go to work. Now,
I'd love to know just specifically a little bit what immunotherapy is. It a vitamin up? Is it like upregulating your vitamin deficiency? Just a little bit about what that actually is.
immunotherapy is basically a type of treatment that is now becoming established in cancer medicine, so by oncologists. Every oncologist should know what immunotherapy is, should be already using it. And
Mhm.
they are medicines, okay, developed by biopharmaceutical companies that you
Okay.
deliver to a patient in trouble.
Okay.
And what it does is it actually ramps up your own immune system that might not be able to find the cancer. Because think about our immune system, right? We've got immune cells that are patrolling our body all the time. Our immune system normally protects us against invaders from the outside world, viruses and bacteria and fungi, so that's why we don't get sick all the time. You go take a subway, you go to a bus, you ride an airplane, you don't usually get sick, for most people, most of the
Yeah.
time. It's because our immune system is like hard at work protecting us. Our
Hmm.
immune system protects us not only from invaders from the outside of our body, but also from inside our body. Invaders inside our body are abnormal cells like cancer cells. So
Yeah.
normally, by the way, we are all, here's a shocking truth. We are all forming cancers inside our body all the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
from children to adults. And in fact, but most of those cancer cells will never become full blown tumors and be dangerous for us. All right, cancer is cancer is a natural process. Actually, if you think about it, you and I have 40 trillion cells in our body. Okay, each of those cells have to copy and paste itself exactly so that we're still around tomorrow. And the only reason that we're here today is because we copied ourselves yesterday, right? So think about it. It makes a lot of sense. Now, still the same, right? Still
Yeah.
you?
I'm thanking my body. Thank you. Good job.
Yeah, yeah. So now look, think about the challenge of copying in order to be able to understand how we how natural it is, how easy it is to form a microscopic cancer. So if I gave you, Danica, a sentence to copy on a Word document on your laptop 10 times, you're going to knock it out of the park. You're going to be perfect. If I told you to take that sentence and copy it 100 times, you're
Yeah.
probably going to make one mistake. All right. If I ask you to, and we've got 40 trillion cells, so if I ask you to copy a sentence 40 trillion times, you are damn sure going to make mistakes.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. Thank goodness our body has a spell checker to be able to find mistakes and
Damn it.
fix
We
them.
really are a computer, aren't we?
Well, but here's the thing, we're not perfect. And so we can't fix all the mistakes. So, net, do you know how many DNA mistakes from copy and pasting occur every day, 24 hours? Take a guess.
Yeah, like 0.1%. I don't know, maybe less,
It's
0.01.
I love how you go for the percentages because it's a very smart way to think about it. But I will tell you, on average, the human body in copying pasting itself every day, every 24 hours, our body makes 10,000 DNA mistakes in copying every day.
Now I'm mad.
Okay, now you're mad. Now you're mad at
Now
your
I'm
body.
mad. Now I'm
Now,
mad.
but here's the thing: each of those little mistakes could turn into a microscopic cancer because it's a mutation. It's a mistake. But thank goodness our body can fix those mistakes, repair those mistakes. All right. That's why we're a defense system. Now, some of those will actually not get fixed, and they become microscopic cancers. A microscopic cancer will grow to about 3 millimeters in diameter. That's about the size of a grain of rice. Can't get any bigger in your body because it doesn't have oxygen or nutrients. It doesn't have a blood supply. So it sticks there at that size, and that's it. Okay. And your immune system wings by, okay, like doing patrol, like cops on a beat in a quiet suburb, and it will see that microscopic cancer sitting there. Okay. It can't get any bigger, but it shouldn't be there. Your immune system drives by just like a cop on a beat. You see a drug dealer on the corner. All right. What's the cop going to do? Going to stick them back in the back of the patrol car and drive them away. All right. And that's what our immune system does. It goes on patrol in our body looking for these little mistakes that are made, these microscopic cancers. And that's why that's why most of us don't develop full blown cancers at earliest stages of our life. And some of us
Wow.
dodge it altogether.
God,
Good,
it makes
strong immune
me
system.
really, it makes me nervous to think about I think it's pronounced Pronovo. Is that how you pronounce it? Pronovo scan or Pronovo?
That's
The,
that.
the
Yeah, that's
body
the
scan
MRI
that,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah.
detects things 10 years in advance. There's something about me that feels a little nervous or skeptical to do it because I trust that, I wonder if it's seeing things that don't ever end up becoming something. But once you put intention to it, all of a sudden now it's real.
Well, that's and that's one of the downsides to doing whole body scanning is that
Yeah.
you'll pick
Have you
up,
done it?
and we call them, I haven't done it yet, but they call them incidentalomas, like, well, they're there, but maybe they'll never turn into anything.
That's
Um,
scary. That's very scary for a normal human being, you know?
yeah, you're totally right. But I will tell you that if you actually focus on investing your energy to boosting your immune system,
Yeah.
that's actually the best cancer defense there is.
Right.
But if you have a cancer, this is where immunotherapy comes into play.
Right.
Like, basically, we've now figured out, maybe somebody who's battling cancer needs to up their own game by getting a treatment that can just help their immune system become super soldiers. All right, and go after those bad guys because now it's not microscopic anymore. It's pretty big,
Okay.
and this is where immunotherapy has actually been such a game changer for many people. Now, here's the interesting thing. Not everybody responds to immunotherapy the way that we hope. Some people do. Like when I'm telling you, like this stage 4 to stage 0, I've seen it enough times where I know it's real. Okay. Like it can happen. But how do we get more people to respond the way that we want to respond? A complete response, meaning basically you dry erase your cancer away. It's gone. My mother, who was 80 when she had endometrial cancer, stage 4, everywhere in her body, got immunotherapy. And in 9 weeks, only 3 treatments, 9 weeks later, stage 0. We scanned her again, nothing. She's
Unbelievable.
90. She just turned 90. Can't even remember she ever had cancer. So that's where we want to be. But what we're beginning to understand is that what you eat and how you treat your body can make the difference between whether you respond to immunotherapy or not. You want to tip the odds in your favor. Stay away from inflammation will make the cancer, even more pissed off. All right. And drive it to grow even faster. Boost your immune system with foods with polyphenols like blueberries and broccoli sprouts. And there's a whole series of things that can boost your immune system. Pomegranate juice, for example, can do it. Dried cranberries can also pump it up. And lots of polyphenols in fruits and vegetables. But the question, I'm going to stick the landing now. Well, what about sugar? Okay. Yes, you should probably stay away from a lot of added sugar, like sodas will actually just put a lot of just plain sugar. Like the typical 12-ounce can of soda has got like 9 teaspoons full of sugar. It's way too much, overwhelms your metabolism, does all those things, insulin like growth factor we talked about earlier. Yeah, you don't want to do that. But what about sugar and fruit? Because, I've heard many people say, well, my doctor said just stay away from anything with any sugar, including fruit. Wrong. Because fruit is naturally sweetened and your body needs sugar anyway to run. So don't be afraid of natural sources of sugar. Okay. I'm going to pick this.
Doesn't your body convert protein into sugar anyway if you need it?
Not protein. Your body can actually make its own sugar. Like
Oh,
if you would go on a long fast, you'll make ketones, which are kind of like a
right.
alternative sugar alternative. Your brain needs a lot of sugar, but we get the energy from our food. The energy includes carbs, and carbs really are sugars that your body stores and burns when you need them. Okay, and so athletes know this, and so the key thing is that what you don't want to do is you don't want to overload your metabolism with carbohydrates. Raise that glucose level, raise that insulin level, raise those insulin growth factor levels. You're pissing off the tumor and giving it an opportunity to actually grow even more fast. But in natural sugars from natural sources, like fruits and vegetables. And I'm going to pick a really sweet fruit like mangoes. I love a ripe mango, or what about a summer peach, right? Hard to
Pineapple.
argue with it. Pineapple, yep, exactly. Another one, right? Those are sweet. All right. But the
Yeah.
amount of fruit that you would normally eat if you ate the whole fruit would not be that much. You get like a sweet hit from maybe one fruit or two. You're most likely you're not. If I were to sit down with you over lunch or breakfast, we're not going to eat a whole pineapple at one sitting, most likely. All right. But the point is that you're getting some sweet sugar, but you're also getting dietary fiber. You're also getting polyphenols. And so when you have sweet fruits or the sugar from fruits or vegetables, and there's sugar in tomatoes and sugar in broccoli. That's totally fine. You are actually getting all these other benefits from it that are actually helping to tip the balance in your body against the cancer because they're activating your health defenses, boosting your immune system, cutting off the blood supply to the tumor. So this is actually how you get to be a responder to immunotherapy. You want to tweak all these other health defenses. Don't
Mhm.
just sit back and let, the medical system take care of it. Like, when you go to the clinic, infusion clinic, that's sick care for your cancer. When you go home, that's healthcare. That's what you do for yourself. Healthcare is where the home is, actually. Sick care is where the doctors and infusion clinics are. And I think, this is a more holistic, integrated way to
Right.
think about how to deal with disease. You never want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but you got to be careful what you put in the water.
One thing that came to mind with gut health that feels like there's a new level of concern and fear around taking, but sometimes is essential because it's just what's going on in your body, is antibiotics. And tell me what does that do? I mean, I've heard horror stories that it takes years to regenerate the gut flora back to a healthy place again, or perhaps never get back there again. What is the truth about the effect of antibiotics on gut health?
Okay. First of all, let me tell you, as a researcher, I study the microbiome, so I can address exactly what you asked, with science based on what we know today. And we don't know everything. And so, like, I'm an honest scientist, and if you talk to a real scientist, they tell you when they don't know something. All right. So I'll tell you what I do know. What I do know is that we've got 39 trillion bacteria in our body. That's a lot of bacteria, and they form an ecosystem. And an ecosystem would be like the Great Barrier Reef. I don't know if you've ever been to the Australia and dove around the Great Barrier Reef.
I've
It,
not dove
it's
there, but I've been close.
it's amazing to see all the diversity of life forms. That's what's happening in our gut. All right. And just like in a reef system, the clownfish and the anemone and the moray eel and the starfish and the blue lobster, they're all working together to keep that area very healthy. All right, and keep the reef healthy. And that's what our bacteria are also doing, right? So we're lowering inflammation, helping our immune system, doing all the good stuff that we want it to be doing. Now, you take an antibiotic is designed to kill bacteria. Now, antibiotics can be life-saving. Let me just put that right up front. Without antibiotics, a lot of us would be dead today. All right, because we are confronting. Think about it. Before antibiotics, like people died of like the simplest thing.
I mean, I don't know if you've been watching any of these more common shows these days that have been coming out, like 1883, 1923, American Primeval, like all of these shows where it's just even Yellowstone, like mass murders going on, which is what comes to mind because I just finished one of those shows last night. But the fact that they would have a simple injury, like, one of the episodes, a girl gets shot with an arrow and they dip it in manure. So it's filled with garbage and it literally will always kill you because there's nothing to fight it. So, yes, this used to
Yeah,
be life threatening.
yeah,
Antibiotics
no,
are
and that,
wonderful to
yeah.
have.
And by the way, George Washington, the president of the United States had access to the best medical care at the time. He died of strep throat because there
Yeah,
was no antibiotics,
right.
right? Okay, so I think we both agree, and we've established now that
Yeah,
antibiotics can be life saving.
100%.
They're a revolution, but we now know that we don't want to be just nuking all the bacteria in our body. That's really bad. In fact, when I was in medical school, Danica, I was taught I had to memorize like thousands of bacteria for tests, and we had to memorize
Like
what
another
antibiotics would
language.
kill them. Oh, it totally is, totally is. And we were told, must know bacteria, must kill bacteria, must write an antibiotic to kill bacteria. Like that's how you pass the exam. But actually, it turns out that most of the bacteria that we will meet in our lives are actually good bacteria. Occasionally, we'll run into a bad guy. It's rare, all right, relatively rare compared to how many good guys are around. So, antibiotics can damage our gut microbiome for sure. How do we know this? Well, we know this not only theoretically, but we've seen it in a lab. What about in people? Well, there was a study that was published in the journal Nature a few years ago that I found was stunning. In women with breast cancer, they studied a huge number of women with breast cancer and studied their survival, how well they did. Okay. And then they correlated with how many times they received antibiotics compared to survival. And what was stunning was that compared to women who did not receive any antibiotics, all right,
Who are they?
women who even received one antibiotic had a lower survival. Women who received up to 8 times antibiotics had a much decreased survival after diagnosis. Okay, and so how do
Oh,
you put this
after
together?
diagnosis, if they've
After
received
diagnosis,
any. Okay, I was like, I
yeah,
have
yeah.
taken antibiotics at least 8 times, I'm sure, in my life,
Yeah, no, no. This is after
Okay.
diagnosis.
Okay, thank you.
In the course of medical treatment,
Right.
like so they were covering.
Got
Did
it.
they get none? Did they get one? Did they get two? Did they get five? Did they get 8? The more times they got antibiotics, to lower their survival. Well, that makes sense because we know the gut microbiome actually lowers inflammation and boosts your immune system. You start knocking those good guys out. You're tipping that. Oh, think about tipping that odds.
Yeah.
You're tipping the odds against you now. All right. So that's one piece of evidence. Now, I will also tell you that you can recover your microbiome pretty quickly. I love to address confusion and clear up myths. And I think this idea that, like your gut microbiome might never recover is a little bit of a myth. So I'm going to take out Thor's hammer and I'm going to smash it
Good.
right now.
I love that.
Okay. So studies have been done looking at how quickly your gut microbiome can recover from damage from different types of injuries and insults. Okay. And it turns out that within the first 12 hours after you do something with like an antibiotic, your gut microbiome will start to recover within 12 hours,
Hmm.
basically by the next day. By
Right.
24 hours, you've gained a lot of it. By about 2 weeks, it's usually resilient enough to bounce back more or less where it needs to be.
Hmm.
So just like other parts of our body, we're pretty resilient. You can get back to where you want to be. Like this is like hope, not all hope is lost if you've got
Good. I mean, I
antibiotics.
was very scared
However,
to hear it would never recover. That sounded wildly, scary.
yeah. Now that said, you want to actually do everything possible for your gut microbiome to recover, which means that you want to actually, eat more whole fresh foods. You want to stay away from alcohol, stay away from ultra processed foods. If you want your gut to actually get a little bit better. Now, I'll tell you, there's another area that I'm really concerned about that I think is cutting edge research, and I think everybody is starting to become aware. I'm just pointing that out because we're talking about balance and we're talking about
Yeah.
tipping the odds in your favor. You've heard about microplastics, right? The
Oh
new
yeah.
topic about the plastics that are everywhere.
Oh
We
yeah.
can't avoid them. Even one study even estimated that on average, we eat about a credit card's worth of plastic every week,
Yeah,
which is
that's
kind of
wild.
crazy to think about. All right. Now, whether it's really a credit card's worth or less, the point is made that everything that we touch and eat and
Oh,
handle
that's why
and
it's
breathe,
glass.
smart,
Everything possible.
smart.
Stainless steel, glass, like I do everything there's things you can do to help
Yeah.
yourself. But it
Lower it.
I can imagine if you're someone that drinks out of plastic bottles all the time, if you're someone that microwaves things all the time, if
Yep.
you cook with plastic, I mean, I can imagine that it
Yeah.
cut on plastic cutting boards, it's there.
Yeah, no, totally. And I used just a year ago, maybe a couple of years ago, I used to say, well, when people were asking me about microplastic, I'm like, we don't have enough data to know what the harms might be, but it just stands to reason you don't want extra plastics in your body, microplastics in your body. Well, now we have the data. And recent studies have been shown, and it started with a research in Italy where a group of cardiologists and neurologists were studying the blockages in the carotid arteries that feed the brain, which can be narrowed. They found that when they were scraping out the blockage just to clear it up so you wouldn't have a stroke, that they were looking under the microscope and they found freaking plastic embedded in the plaques, the lining of the blockages going to the brain. Holy cow! Now we can find plastic. I mean, and there's pictures of it, like little pieces of blue plastic inside these blood vessels. And then they found that. Then they studied this over a long period of time. And they found those people who had embedded plastic in the blockages in the plaques of the blood vessels feeding their brain had a fourfold increase in the risk of having a fatal heart attack or a stroke. Boom. All right. That's a correlation, not causation. But I will tell you, now we're beginning to start, now the forensics are coming in and we're
Sure.
starting to take a look at where else are these things. We know it
Wow.
causes inflammation. Inflammation is not good for cancer. And do you know all the places we're finding microplastic? We're finding it in the brain.
Well, in the balls, the men's balls, there's this thing that
Yeah.
came out. They're like, every man has plastic in his balls. And then it leads me to wonder about fertility and,
Yep. And I'll tell you, let's go there
yeah.
because that not only have they found plastic in testicles and in the penis, urologists have found it, but
Wow.
it's also found in human semen. It's expelled from the balls,
Oh my
from the
God.
testicles and semen, and in pregnant women, they have now detected microplastics in the placenta, which then exposes the fetus to microplastics as well,
Oh my
right?
God.
So
Endocrine
this is
disruption and
yep.
imbalance, essentially.
Yep.
We're
Yep. So besides the sort of like the alarm that obviously, you and I share about this, I think the practical thing that people can do, what is it that you can do to lower your risk for all this is kind of what you just said. If you're going to drink water, and drinking water is super important for hydration, hydration is critical for health, if you're going to get bottled water, get it out of glass. If you're going to carry a thermos with you or a water bottle with you, don't do the plastic one with your sports team on it.
yeah.
Get it in, get one that actually, when you open it up, the thermos, look inside. Is it metal or is it glass? If it's neither of those, don't buy it. Go for one that's got glass or metal. All right, those we're not going to shed microplastics. Don't use plastic silverware. Don't use those plastic containers to store your leftovers. Get
Right.
glass ones. If it's plastic top, that's okay, but don't nuke it with all the stuff with the plastic on it.
Right.
Open it up, right? So there's all these things that we can actually do to lower our risk. Don't drink out of a styrofoam cup. Oh, by the way, there's some hidden parts where you can actually get microplastics you wouldn't believe. Tea bags. Tea
Yeah.
bags
Oh, sure.
will
Yep.
shed microplastics because tea bags they look like paper and they are paper, but to prevent them from ripping open, the companies spray them with a small layer of plastic,
Oh,
and so when
wow.
you dunk them, you can get 1 billion microplastic particles in a
Oh,
cup of
wow.
tea.
Oh, tea drinkers who think they're just above us all, coffee drinkers. Little do they know.
Well, I love tea and coffee, but what I say is, if you're going to drink tea, loose leaf tea, and then you could
With
put
a
it into a
metal
tea
dip,
ball
like, yeah, a
with a
T-ball,
metal
right?
dip. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
Wow.
easiest way to do it. So
Wow.
for all these obstacles, there are solutions, and
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
the key thing in our conversation is that like there's a lot of stuff out there that is intimidating, scary, risky, but the good news when it comes down to our health and our diet and our lifestyle, we can make everyday choices that put the power back in our hands, to lower our risk. And that's really all we can ask for, I think is, and then if you line it with the foods that you actually love, like you were talking about the different diets you try, if I were to work with you, I would say, Danica, what are your favorite foods? And you can give me a list and I would just pick out the ingredients from your favorite foods that I know are super healthy for you. Okay. And then you're already ahead of the game because you already love the stuff that's good for you.
Yep.
That's the best way to start.
I have to ask about RFK, his hearing in front of the Senate today. I think, he has so many ideas to improve the health of this country. Everything from taking the fluoride out of water to removing, having there not be pharmaceutical commercials on TV to fixing farming and all kinds of different things, and including more vaccine research. So I don't know how closely you follow that, but I think he could have a huge effect on many different aspects of health in this country. What kind of things would you hope that he would be able to implement that would improve some of these issues that we're facing today?
Yeah, well, listen, I got skin in the game because I'm in the trenches as a doctor, and I'm also a researcher that is part of like the whole national movement to actually do more research on health and disease. So, yeah, I follow this stuff in a big way. Let me just tell you that our American health system has for decades been in need of an overhaul. we need really big time improvements to it. Everybody knows, anybody who's actually had an interaction with a hospital knows how clunky and inefficient and frustrating it can actually be. And, if you're a patient or a patient's family member, it's frustrating enough. I can tell you as an insider how frustrating it is for the workers, for the doctors and nurses inside the system to actually be able to tangle with the bear every single day. And so we all, I think, are craving progress. We need to find new ways to innovate what we do so we can do better for people faster with less frustration. And ideally, we can actually get rid of some of the high cost of healthcare as well. So it become more affordable, and it's just easier to wrangle that information. I mean, listen, part of the challenge, earlier you were alluding to, we were talking about just how much crazy information is out there. It's hard to sort through. We are supposed to trust our healthcare providers, our doctors, and our health systems to give us the right information. The reason that people go to the outside of the health system is because you're not getting the information that you want, you're asking for inside the health system.
Or it's not working, or you tried and it's not working.
And it's not working. Exactly. So I think that, one of the things I hope for is more efficiency in the healthcare system that is really patient focused and really addresses what patients are craving and they need, and more support. And also using the best of science. Because I sort of my job, I have one foot in the future and one foot in the present. So I see what's coming, and I'm frustrated always by how slowly change takes place. Like, we can discover this stuff, immunotherapy. I always tell people, if you have cancer and you should definitely ask your doctor, am I eligible for immunotherapy? Can that be helpful to me? I'm shocked when there are patients who say, my doctor never even offered that to me.
God, why don't we have it as preventative? I mean, surely any way that we can upregulate immunity is a great thing.
Well, and the preventative stuff that I also hope that we are moving towards, and I think our as a nation, we're moving in towards this dialogue. Why don't we just prevent disease in the first place? Why don't we just broaden our focus and maybe switch our focus so we're looking at intercepting disease before it even happens. And by the way, if we can do it with our diet and lifestyle, and we can make the dietary part, the food part, enjoyable, joyful. Food's supposed to be joyful. That would be actually the best of all possible worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think maybe, one problem, and I don't know what your experience with this is, but when the FDA's research is basically funded by big food and pharma, we're screwed.
Yeah. Well, let me just say that I think that part of the progress that we need to make is more efficiency, more streamlined processes. How we do that, I think, remains to be seen. But there are over the decades, there's been a lot of deadwood put into how we look at food and how we look at drugs. And by the way, the same way we said antibiotics can be life-saving, you never want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Let's keep the baby in. Let's clean out the bathwater. Let's put more bathwater in there, like clean water, and maybe you invite some more babies in as well. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that I look at this as sort of like, we could be in an age of abundance where the opportunities to do better are so much in front of us. And I think that we trip over our own feet sometimes because we are so desperate to retain some of the things that have been done in the past that might not work so well. So that's one of the things that I'm very hopeful that we can change, if everybody works together to be able to get there. I also think we need to actually, really address our food systems so that we can have better foods. I mean, I think that that's really
food system. What do you mean by food system?
Well, I think that it's everything from regulation of foods to agriculture. Like, for example, we do need to take better care of our land. The emphasis on profit to be able to grow crops as fast as they can, like big mass crops that are subsidized. So we got too much corn and too much this and too much that. And then we got to turn it into oil, and then we sell it as oil. There's sort of this misalignment of our whole system of what we're doing. In the meantime, we're fertilizing our soil with synthetic chemicals that are killing the soil's microbiome. By the way, we talked about healthy gut bacteria. Do you know that our planet has a microbiome in the soil? All
Yeah.
right.
Well,
And
you
when
can turn like what is it, hydrangeas, you can turn colors based on the pH of the soil, things
you
like that, which should be a direct indication that the soil matters.
that's a great example. Anybody can understand that, right? I've got an
Yeah.
tight range. It's like, you want blue, you got to stick something into the
Right.
soil, right? Yeah, so you know it. But the point is this: my organization at the Angiogenesis Foundation, we've been collaborating recently with farms that are doing regenerative farming,
Oh, cool.
and what we've been doing is comparing the micronutrients, the beneficial stuff, in the same plants that are grown regeneratively on the farm to kind of like mass grown crops to see what the differences are. And we're finding dramatically improved nutrient density in the regenerative grown crop. So it makes sense. Better soil, better plants, better crop, better fruit,
Yeah.
better vegetable.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think we need to do better in that part of it as well. Recently, the FDA removed a red dye number 3 from the
Right.
food system. They
Yeah,
banned it.
just a couple weeks
My
ago.
gosh, we've known that this was a cancer causing chemical for 30 years.
So,
What took us so long? And by the way, the other thing is that they banned it, a few weeks ago, but they're still allowing manufacturers to have 2 years to fix it. So now consumers have to go look at the package ingredients themselves. The burden is now on the consumer, right? So again, I'm just giving you some examples
yeah.
of things that like where we need the fix. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I mean, you said you had the Angiogenesis Foundation and obviously your private sector. I mean, how beneficial, what kind of research do you think you'd be able to provide to the FDA or to federal companies to be able to improve our health?
yeah, well, we're doing it right now. Like
Oh,
I told you,
good.
like comparing the regenerative versus the thing.
Yeah.
We're also looking at soil microbiome. We're looking at like what the differences are if you have good soil versus depleted soil versus hydroponics. Even we already know. By the way, and we're building on a body of research that's really amazing. So this whole idea of organics, right? I used to get really pissed off about organic. Like people tried years ago, they're trying to get me to buy organic food. I'm like, it rubs me the wrong way that I should have to pay more to get less of chemicals that I didn't want in the first place.
Right,
Right?
exactly.
It's like totally miss. But then you know what? Recently, I changed my mind completely. And I'll tell you why. I was
Mm.
talking to botanists who are doing researchers on foods, and they basically told me that these bioactives, the polyphenols in foods, right, that we want the ellagic acid in strawberries that lower inflammation, all right, as an example, and improve our circulation. Those polyphenols are made by the plants as a defense mechanism to heal itself. So how does that have to do to do organics? Okay, so a natural plant growing in the wild in the most natural state is going to be growing in an environment with little bugs flying around, nibbling on the leaves and the stems. That's an injury. So when the plant has injuries, it's going to make more polyphenols when there's bugs around doing their thing normally in the environment. You spray pesticides on it now, bugs
No
go
odds.
down, less injury, no need to make as many polyphenols, and so the fruit that's made, like the strawberry, is relatively depleted. In fact, studies have been done showing that strawberries grown more naturally, so a la organic style, have up to 3 times more of the polyphenols, the ellagic acid, than the
Mm.
ones that are treated with pesticides. All right. Now, so I started to change my mind about this. I'm like, you know what? I don't care about the sticker that says organic, but I do care about the intent and the practice that the farmers actually use. Like I think that more people we should be emphasizing this, but this changed my mind in terms of like the ingredients that we'd actually buy. Now, I will tell you there are some foods that you definitely kind of can't avoid pesticides if you buy conventional, like apples. So a study was done at the University of Massachusetts in Worcester, looking at apples and standard pesticides at the standard concentrations that it would spray in a field for your standard apple. Okay, and what they found is that the apple skin is very thin. When you
Mhm.
spray pesticides on there, the pesticides will penetrate 20% into the skin. Can't wash it off. All right. So if you don't peel away the skin, and there's good stuff in the apple skin, There's
Right, it's a
fiber, there's
fiber.
sorbic acid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you want that stuff. So, that's an example where, okay, organically grown apples are going to actually have, you'll be able to dodge the pesticide that's in the skin. So you'll be able to have more of the dietary fiber.
So there's the clean 15 and the dirty dozen, right? Usually when it comes to which ones to buy organic and which ones to not buy organic, or not necessarily as important. And you think that's true?
I think that there's probably a lot more on the list in terms of like clean, because I'm as concerned about getting more of the good stuff in. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like,
Yeah.
when it comes to food and health, my emphasis, listen, there's plenty of people that talk about the things you should remove from your diet. And I think that they're important. Those are important voices. And there's certainly things like we talked about already that you don't want to be eating, like microplastics.
Yeah.
But there aren't enough voices that talk about the good things you should eat. The language of food shouldn't be about fear, guilt, and shame. It should really be about joy, satisfaction, comfort. And my own research is really driving towards like, what are the good things you should be eating that you love, like tomatoes, for example. A Mediterranean diet packed with tomatoes. Tomatoes has got lycopene. Lycopene not only lowers the risk of prostate cancer and breast cancer, not only improves your waistline by burning away harmful visceral fat by lighting up your metabolism, but recently it was even shown that lycopene can actually improve brain function by having more serotonin, the happiness hormone, the neurotransmitter in your brain. And a study out of Iran looked at lycopene itself, about the amount you would have in just one glass of tomato juice, or half one cup of tomato juice, or half a cup of sun-dried tomatoes, that people who are eating that amount every day could actually have higher levels of optimism, confidence, and sense of self-worth. How about that?
My goodness, I love that. As far as the biological effects to look for, what would you say for someone that is not sure if something's wrong with them? What are, because I feel like it's obvious when something is obviously wrong to a visual effect or affect that you might have, but what about the more subtle signs? What should people be looking out for?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I don't get asked that one very often. So there are some subtle signs that if you otherwise seem and think you're healthy, that might be sort of little red flags, little early alarm signals for you. I'll tell you some easy ones to think about. Number one, if you're having difficulty sleeping. Sleeping is a very natural thing. It's the one thing that nobody teaches us how to do in our whole lives, right? Think about it from the time you're born. Like, you're born, you come out, suck on get your first thing of breast milk, and then you fall asleep. But if you're actually having trouble sleeping, there's usually something that's out of balance in your body, and it's worth figuring that out. I think another sign that would be a subtle sign to look out for that a lot of people don't realize is if you feel lightheaded. And the reason is that it's a cardiovascular thing. In order for us to not feel lightheaded, a lot of the gyroscope in our brain and how our brain's working is perfectly working. I mean, think about it. Like if you have what do you call it? Like, a camera, like filming a movie, you've got a camera on a system that balances so the camera doesn't
Oh yeah.
shake
Yeah.
around, right?
Yeah.
So that's really important. But if you have any problem with that balancing mechanism, that camera, it's going to feel like wobbly. And so when you're feeling a little wobbly, a little lightheaded, usually there's something slightly out of whack. Maybe it's something as simple as hydration. Drink a little more water, you actually get it back in balance. Now, another thing that actually is a very, very subtle thing is actually breath. How your breath, the smell of your breath. I'm going after the things that are really subtle,
I like that.
but that
No,
are
because
signals.
it's much easier when it's early to catch
Yeah,
it.
if you think about it, our gut is not just the lower part of our intestines. It also our gut starts in our mouth, and so when you talk about healthy gut bacteria, although most of us think about the microbiome living in the colon, yeah, there's a lot down there, but actually we have a microbiome in our mouth as well. Healthy ecosystem of bacteria in our mouth doesn't smell bad. That's why like a baby's breath is like really sweet and smelling. Like it's not offensive. When you actually wind up actually having foul breath, bad breath, somebody might remark on it, you smell it yourself. It's usually signaling that there's a disturbance in the microbiome. Now, maybe that's due to an infection. Maybe it's due to inflammation. Maybe it's due to gingivitis, gum infection, something else going on. Okay, probably a cavity is like only part of the problem, but there might be something bigger. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because now we're realizing that the microbiome health of our mouth, of our gums, is linked to dementia of our brains.
Wow.
So, and also linked to heart disease as well. So, if
Wow.
you want to have a healthy heart and a healthy brain, sort of monitoring how things are going in your mouth, like going to the dentist and getting your flossing, brushing your teeth, scraping your tongue, all those things are useful ways to
That scraping the
for
tongue thing's kind of shocking when you do it. You're like, oh my God. And I would bet very, very few people do it. But when I first started doing it, I was like, wow, that's important.
I do it. And by the way, so here's the thing: you scraped off all that stuff. By the next morning, the healthy microbiome of your tongue is grown right back. That's how fast it can recover.
That's fantastic. I feel like we're in such a day and age of stress and anxiety, and especially in our youth. And I think just feels like anyone under the age of 30, it's just hardwired into you. So, I know it's kind of a big question, but I'd just be curious for you to sort of briefly explain the cascade effect of stress and anxiety and, perhaps what people can do to, what the benefits are of alleviating that on the body.
We've known for years that stress degrades your health. A little bit of stress is probably good. Like before you got in the car to
Mhm.
race, that little stress gives you some edge, like preparing,
Yeah.
you're leaving. I used to play the piano and do competitive,
Oh, wow.
performances in piano, like a little nervousness before you get on stage. Yeah, adrenaline is good. That's like good stress. But, the kind of stress that actually is so harmful is kind of relationship stress, work stress, financial stress, fear that media exposure gives us to, war and disease and, all that climate, all the stuff that like it's overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
Overwhelming stress is like we are not hardwired to deal well with overwhelming stress. By the way, we saw this in the pandemic. In the beginning, we're like, okay, what do we do? How do we get our act together? Like, humans are locked arms, and you wear that down a year or so, people start like eating each other, right? Like we all became cannibalistic. Like it's terrible, right? Like I mean, literally, it's like a breakdown of humanity, and so that's just a supercharged example of how stress is just not good for us. Now,
Yeah.
what does stress do? Like chronic stress. Chronic stress raises inflammation. And we know that inflammation is the root cause of a lot of chronic diseases. So you want to actually manage your stress just to lower inflammation. What's an easy way to understand that? When somebody tells you to chill, let's go chill for a little bit. You're going to feel more relaxed. Feeling more relaxed just it's a metaphor for the inflammation that will be going down in your body. Very important. You want to go do yoga or meditate, you'll chill even more. You want to do Tai Chi, that's sort of ancient practices for movement with mental focus, you'll chill even more. Like that's what's actually, these are good counters to some of the stresses that we actually have today. The other thing is that cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and adrenaline, a little bit, not not bad. Actually keeps us on our toes, which actually is probably good for us. Our body likes small challenges every now and then. So you want a little hit of adrenaline every now and
When we
then,
wake
right?
up, our cortisol should be the highest, right? Because we wake up
Boom.
like, all right, here we go, get ready for the day. So it serves a
That's
purpose.
cool. Normal. Okay. But when it's up all the time, like your fight or flight is on all the time, think about these situations where people are fleeing from disaster or recovery, whether it's a natural one or man made or whatever it is, like listen, I mean, that's no good because it wears you down. When you have high cortisol levels, okay, not only is your cardiovascular system stressed out, your pulse is up, your blood flow is actually damaging, wearing down the lining of your circulation. Your immune system actually goes down as well. And high stress damages your gut microbiome. We've been talking about this. Now you're damaging your gut, all right, all by itself. And when you're stressed, you're not sleeping well, less sleep, wear down your immune system even more, wear down your gut microbiome even more, and you are probably not making good choices. When you're sleep deprived and you're chronically stressed, you're going to be reaching for stuff to eat that are probably not that good for you,
Or alcohol too.
and alcohol or whatever substance, whatever and of course people do reach for something to kind of like escape the war altogether in terms of like substance abuse, and now you've got taken it to an even other level. So this is really kind of like the gift that keeps on taking away is what stress actually does for you. So what can we all do? All right. The good news is that I think stress starts, first of all, you can't stop the stuff that's happening in the outside world, but we can actually start with ourselves. So I think if all of us can take a quiet moment by ourselves, and even if you've got a lot to do, go in a quiet room by yourself, do it every morning at least, all right, and take a few moments and just be by yourself and close your eyes and try to think of nothing and breathe. One way to actually occupy your mind so you're not thinking about, your mind isn't racing, is to focus on your breathing. And I think this is something that, like, Tibetan monks know, in yoga, they know this. Breathing in, focusing on the circulation of breath, breathing out. And if you control your breath, automatically it lowers your stress levels. It actually lowers your brains and your kidneys, the release of adrenaline, the release of cortisol. It all starts. You can control it. Like, that's your hand on the joystick a little bit. Start with that. The other thing that's interesting, I like to talk about things that people can do something about, right? Like, if you want to be really riled up, right? What do? Like, from the time we were young, put on your favorite music, your favorite band, whatever your style of music is, and crank it loud, and go dance. You don't have to rave, but you want to, like, kind of really move to the music. That gets your adrenaline up, all right? And that's a stressor in a good way, like to go to a concert and, not everybody has to be in a mosh pit, all right? But the counter is also music. They've actually studied animals and given them rock music to listen to, like, heavy metal music, and study their cortisol levels. It goes sky high.
Wow.
All right, in the cage. And then they play classical music. They play Strauss, Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, and the cortisol levels go down.
Wow.
And so another way to do this is actually just to use music as a calming, soothing instrument. So listen, this is anybody who's ever had a massage, or gone to a spa, you know what they do? They have you stay down and it's calm and put some music on, and you do feel chill afterwards. And so you don't have to go to a massage at the spa to get calm. You can start to do these kinds of things yourself. And then the other thing that I have started doing, as part of my New Year's resolution, and this is something that, I don't mind sharing, is really, I think from a stress perspective, because we all have so much stress. I decided to do something called a friction audit. A friction audit is for me to sort of think through, what am I encountering on a regular basis in my life that's causing friction, that causes it in some way, like I'm rubbing against it and it's pissing me off, or it's really aggravating. I want to audit that and write that down someplace, and then see what I can do to actually either lessen it or just get rid of it.
That's fantastic. Wow. There's so many areas that people could look: social media, friends, work.
Yeah.
All of those kinds of things. Well, thank you. And I'm going to finish. I lied. There's going to be one more question, but it's only just a pure opinion, and it should be hopefully a quick answer. But with all the longevity and all the health things that we have going on and technology, and how old do you think we'll be able to live? Someone like myself, or someone in this sort of like 30 to 60 range, how old do you think we'll be able to live?
Well, at the very beginning, we talked about the fact that there are 700,000 people that are 100 or older. Yeah. So I think all of us actually have a chance to throw our hat in that ring. As we're having this conversation, we all realize, whoever you are listening to this, and listening to the answer to this question, you've had your own life history. You've had your own exposures. You have your own stress you're dealing with. And so, the amazing thing about the resilience of the body that I can tell you as a researcher and as a doctor is that we can bounce back really quickly. It's never too late to start doing something good for ourselves so that we can actually extend our lives. And, to me, it's much more than a number. Like, yeah, sure, pick the triple digit you want. That's a great goal. And I think that, more of us can get there if we all take deliberate, intentional steps to step away from the things that are going to derail us from getting there, and add more things that tip the balance in favor of our living old. But on top of that, you got to enjoy your life. I mean, like, it's actually stressful to be restrictive. It's also stressful to only be robotic and only follow one plan. I think everyone needs to know themselves really well, like, what is it that gives you pleasure? I think to be vibrant, you also need to feel pleasure. You need to feel joy. You need to feel, and those things, by the way, relax you. They chill you out, and therefore deal with your stress. So I mean, like, you've actually brought us full
Yeah.
circle
Yeah.
back to what it takes to be a happy person that's going to live as long as possible.
Go live in Greece and Italy. Oh my goodness.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. I really appreciate it. And I feel like people are going to learn a lot of really great things. Some are quite practical, but isn't that the way of it? A lot of times we get away from that. And some is fantastic research. So thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on. And this is a great conversation. I mean, you're asking some really, really deep questions.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Pretty Intense podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard today and you want to hear more, please click on the subscribe button.